Hello friends! This episode will be an interactive one. We will solve puzzles. One of them will be easy, but others not so much. To solve these puzzles, you need to consider every situation carefully because the answer is hidden in each of them. If something is unclear, you can always press pause. Okay, so now you will see 10 criminal mysteries that will boggle your mind. The police were called to a jewelry store because a single male robber wearing a mask and brandishing a gun stole some diamonds. A short distance away from the crime scene, the police found the loot in a patch of plants. They also had two suspects, G.V. Higgins and Edwin McBain. Without even interviewing the suspects, the police knew Higgins committed the robbery. So here's a question: how did they know who the robber is? Answer: all Higgins' body was covered in cuts. The body of Conan D. Arthur was found in the ground near a 7-story apartment building. It was clear that Arthur died as a result of falling out of one of the windows. A detective was called and entered the apartment on the first floor that faced where the body was found. He opened the window and flipped a coin which fell to the floor. After doing so, he left the coin, went on the second floor and repeated the same. He then continued to do the same thing on the rest of the floors, except for the roof. It was closed. After visiting each apartment, he returned to the ground floor and announced that the man had been murdered. Question: how did he know? Answer: the detective had to open the window on every floor. One window would have been left open. That means the killer threw the victim out of the window and closed it afterwards. The police were called to the home of Phyllis Dorothy, who died a few hours before the police were alerted. In her hand was a revolver. On the desk, there's a cassette tape recorder. At first sight, it looked like a suicide. The detective pressed play, and there was a woman's voice, presumably Dorothy's. It said, "Life has become too difficult and I can't go on." Then there's a gunshot and the tape goes quiet. The detective smirks because he knows that this was no suicide. Question: how does he know? Answer: how did Dorothy rewind the tape if she shot herself? Joe Nesbo, a traveling salesman, was staying at a hotel for business. He was having a dinner meeting that night, so he decided to take a nap in the middle of the afternoon. He was awakened by a knock on the door, and then a man walked in. "Oh my, I'm terribly sorry, this isn't my room," he said. Nesbo got up, locked the door, and called the lobby to tell there was a burglar on the prowl. Question: what made Nesbo think that? Answer: if the man thought it was his room, he wouldn't have knocked. With the calm of long autumn rains, the Wimmer family had left their summer cottage and returned to their city apartment. Before the moving, Wimmer had the arrangement with his neighbor Zilbert, so Zilbert would take care of his cottage. Shortly after New Year, neighbor called to Wimmer and said with agitated voice that the cottage was robbed. Wimmer immediately called the police and his neighbor Zilbert was questioned. He told the following story: "I heard a suspicious noise one night. Despite the bitter cold, I immediately got up and went to Wimmer's cottage. I looked at the window, but all of the windows were frozen, so I couldn't see anything. Then I made a little hole with my warm breath in the ice, which covered the window, and used my pocket flashlight. The room was a mess. Next morning, I called Wimmer and told him everything. The neighbor was arrested after that story." Question: what's wrong with Zilbert's story? Answer: windows cannot freeze on the outside, only inside. You cannot make a hole with your breath in the icy window, it's almost impossible. A detective was called to a rather unusual crime scene. Christine Agatha is dead, definitely the victim of murder. The weapon used to end her life was a big pair of scissors. However, Mrs. Agatha had not been cut or stabbed. In fact, there was no trace of any blood anywhere in the room. Scissors used in a different way for Agatha's murder. Question: how used scissors to kill the girl? Answer: Christine Agatha was on life support and her tube was cut. It was the middle of a bright and sunny day, and Samantha Hammett was killed in public by her husband Dashiell. There were plenty of witnesses who watched the killing, but no one tried to stop it. In the eyes of law, he wasn't a murderer. Therefore, he was never arrested or charged with her death. In fact, after killing his wife, Dashiell went home. Question: how is this possible? Answer: Samantha was a condemned prisoner, and Dashiell was the executioner. After Colin Dexter was arrested for a third time, he landed himself in front of a Judge Lindsay Jeffrey. In his previous 2 court appearances, Dexter swore that he was going to stay out of trouble. Judge Jeffrey wanted to teach Dexter a lesson. She said, "In 3 days' time, I want a note written from you. If you're honest in the note, you'll just be given 10 years in prison. If you lie, you will be hanged." The judge has been sure that Colin Dexter will write confession letter on pain of an execution, and she will appoint to him maximum term. 3 days later, a rather smug Dexter gave the note to Judge Jeffrey. She read the note and the blood drained from her face. She quietly said, "Please release Mr. Dexter." Question: what did Dexter's letter say? Answer: I will be hanged. If he was going to be hanged, that would make the statement true, so he couldn't be hanged. However, by not hanging him, it would make the statement false, meaning the note cannot be true or false. Police arrived at a horrible accident on a highway. A motorhome and truck collided head-on when the motorhome unexpectedly crossed the center line. The driver of the truck and 2 passengers in the motorhome were killed. There was only 1 survivor. The police interviewed Raymond. He said that Elmore was driving and he and James were in the back playing cards when they hit the truck, sending James flying backwards, and he struck the back of his head on the handle of the back door. Raymond said that he wasn't killed because he was sitting down during the accident. The medical examiner also concluded that James had died because he hit the back of his head on the door. And still, the detective arrested Raymond for murder. Question: why Chandler arrested for murder? Answer: James survived the collision, and after the accident, Raymond killed him by smashing his head onto the door handle. It has distracted the driver from the road, and he lost control. Patrick and Angela Lehane had been married for several years when Patrick had to go away for 3 months for work. When he returned home, Patrick decided he wanted to surprise Angela, so he walked into their home and found his wife in the bedroom. Hoping to catch the surprised look on her face, he snapped the picture above. They went to a nice restaurant before returning home for a lovely evening. But the next morning, Patrick got up and looked at the picture of his smiling wife from the night before. He picked up his gun and shot his wife to death. The police charged Patrick with the first-degree murder. The prosecutor demanded for the death penalty for the motiveless and cold-blooded murder. Patrick claimed there was a motive and he didn't plan the murder. He gave the picture as evidence. He was found guilty of second-degree murder and get life in prison. Question: what was in the photo? Answer: Angela was cheating on Patrick and was hiding a man in the room when he took a picture. You can see a part of his face in there. So, how many correct answers do you have? You can share that in the comments. Don't forget to press thumbs up. Thanks for your attention, everyone. Good luck, and we'll see you next time.